In the deepest vaults of the Vatican, behind doors sealed for centuries, there is said to be a single letter no one dares to display. The parchment is older than most nations, its ink nearly gone, its corners frayed like burnt silk. Archivists call it the Confession. The hand that wrote it trembled, the name beneath it was Catherine de' Medici. The letter is brief, no more than a few pages, yet its words changed how some historians saw an entire era. It begins with a date, October 25, 1533, and ends with a sentence that feels more curse than prayer. What was taken from me that night, I reclaimed in blood. That October morning, Marseille glittered like a jewel on the southern coast of France. Bells rang over the harbor, ships fired ceremonial cannon, and banners painted with the lilies of France waved in the wind. At 14, Catherine stepped ashore in a gown that shimmered white and gold, a living pledge from the Pope to the French king. To the world, her marriage to Henry, Duke of Orleans, was an alliance destined to bring peace between Florence and France. To Catherine, raised among nuns and tutors, it was supposed to be the beginning of an adventure. She had been told stories of queens loved by their husbands, of courts that glittered with art and poetry. Her heart beat fast with nervous hope. Henry was 15, tall, handsome in a boyish way, yet distant. He spoke little to her, and when he did, his words seemed rehearsed. Beside him, always, was another woman, Diane de Poitiers, twice his age, elegant, cold, and adored by him. Catherine noticed how the courtiers bowed deeper to Diane than to the bride. She smiled politely, unaware that her place in France had already been decided for her. That night, within the palace walls, something occurred, something not recorded in any royal chronicle. What matters for our story is not the detail but the consequence. The event shattered Catherine's belief in romance, in safety, and in the mercy of power. When dawn arrived, she was no longer the girl who had landed at Marseille. She was someone new, quiet, watchful, and resolved never to be powerless again. The following weeks passed in ritual. Dinners, blessings, dances. Henry remained polite but distant, Diane guided him like a puppet. The court saw Catherine as harmless, a foreign ornament. Yet behind her mild eyes, something hard was forming. Each night she lay awake, hearing echoes of laughter from that first night, imagining faces behind curtains, whispers in the dark. She began to memorize voices, gestures, and names. Her mind, once trained for poetry, turned toward strategy. She remembered the lessons from the convent, the Latin aphorisms about patience, the herbal studies that described roots capable of healing or harming. She began copying formulas into a notebook and experimenting quietly with plants from the royal gardens. To her ladies-in-waiting she seemed curious, scholarly. To herself, she was learning control, the one thing no one had allowed her that night. Years passed. Henry became king. Diane became the power behind him. Catherine became the silent queen, ignored but always present. She learned to read men's ambitions as easily as she read Latin. She learned when to flatter, when to disappear, and when to watch. One evening, a courtier who had once mocked her collapsed after a feast. The physicians declared that the food had gone bad. Catherine listened without expression. The next month another courtier fell ill, then another. The court murmured about a curse. Catherine wrote in her diary that night, "Justice is a patient harvest." No one suspected the queen. She played her role flawlessly, pious, charitable, unthreatening. She spoke often of forgiveness, even as she recorded each death with careful precision. In her private notebooks, she never used the word revenge. She called it balance. Of all the figures who haunted her, none loomed larger than Diane. The older woman's influence over Henry humiliated Catherine daily. At public ceremonies, Diane wore the king's colors, Catherine walked behind them both. Servants whispered that the queen tolerated it out of meekness. They were wrong. She tolerated it out of calculation. She understood that power gained too quickly burns away. She would take Diane's place not by scandal but by erosion, slow, invisible, irreversible. time did part of the work. The rest, rumor suggests, was aided by Catherine's quiet art. A powder here, a tincture there, minute enough to dull vitality without arousing suspicion. Month after month, Diane's famed glow faded. Her sharp mind dulled. Still she smiled, unaware that her decline was being measured like the ticking of a clock. When Diane died in her 60s, the court mourned with rehearsed sorrow. Catherine wept, publicly gracious. That night she wrote in her diary, "I have seen the sea reclaim its salt." The meaning died with her, but historians believe it marked the moment she felt her vengeance complete. Yet one space in her diary remained blank, Henry II. The husband who had ignored her, belittled her, and obeyed Diane's whispers even on the throne. Catherine never spoke ill of him in public. She kissed his hand, bore his children, and managed his accounts. But she watched him. Always. In July 1559, Paris prepared for a grand tournament to celebrate peace with Spain. The king, proud and eager, insisted on jousting. Catherine begged him to abstain. He laughed and promised to wear her colors. She smiled and wished him fortune. Under a bright summer sun, thousands gathered. Henry charged down the list against Captain Gabriel de Montgomery. The lances shattered, a splinter pierced the king's helmet and drove deep near his eye. The crowd gasped, then fell silent. For 10 days the king suffered. Surgeons tried, priests prayed, Catherine waited. She rarely left his side. Some claimed to see a faint calm in her eyes as the fever consumed him, though none dared speak it aloud. When Henry finally died, the queen fainted, or seemed to. Later, attendants found on the bedside table a folded scrap of paper bearing 3 interlocking circles and a vertical line. No one could explain the symbol. Those who served Catherine knew better than to ask. Widowhood changed nothing of her ambition, it only freed it. As Queen Mother, Catherine ruled through her sons, balancing factions that tore France apart. She brokered peace, planned wars, and survived conspiracies that killed stronger men. Her enemies feared her calm more than any army. Yet beneath the political genius lay the same wound. Every alliance, every execution, every calculated marriage she arranged seemed to echo the same vow, never again powerless. She built secret laboratories, hired astrologers, and surrounded herself with apothecaries. The French court whispered of poisons hidden in rings, of perfumes that killed with a breath. Whether these tales were true or born of fear hardly mattered. Fear was power, and Catherine understood power better than anyone alive. Near the end of her life, worn and ill, Catherine is said to have summoned a priest from Florence. With him she entrusted a sealed letter and ordered that it be sent to the Vatican after her death. No one knows whether the letter now resting in the archives is that same document, but the words attributed to it bear her tone, measured, sharp, unrepentant. "I was a child," it reads, "and they called it a ceremony. They laughed while I learned what cruelty meant. I prayed for justice, none came. So I became the justice they denied me." A queen must rule even her own memories. Historians argue about the authenticity. Some say the letter was forged by later propagandists eager to paint her as a monster. Others claim handwriting analysis confirms it was hers. The Vatican offers no comment. Catherine de' Medici died in 1589. She left behind 3 kings, a divided kingdom, and a legend that refuses to die. In France, she is remembered both as patron of the arts and as the Black Queen whose intrigues soaked the court in blood. The truth lies somewhere between devotion and ruthlessness. Walk through the ruins of the old palace in Marseille and locals will tell you that on certain nights, when the Mistral wind sweeps through the corridors, you can hear faint music mixed with a woman's soft voice reciting in Italian. No one understands the words, but they say the final phrase repeats like a heartbeat, 3 times in one night. No one knows exactly what the phrase meant to her. Some believe it marked the 3 awakenings on her wedding night, others say it symbolized the 3 great acts of her revenge, against the courtiers, against Diane, against Henry. Whatever the truth, it became her private creed, pain answered with patience, humiliation repaid with mastery. 5 centuries later, Catherine's story still divides historians. Was she evil, or merely forged by evil? Was her cruelty learned, or inherited from an age when women survived only through cunning? Her letter, if genuine, suggests she saw herself not as a villain but as an instrument, shaped by hands that mocked her, sharpened by necessity, destined to strike back. She was both a victim and an architect, a saint and a serpent. And perhaps that is why her legend endures, because it mirrors the oldest truth of power: those who are denied it will one day learn to wield it with precision. If the Vatican's archives ever open that sealed box, if the parchment truly bears her hand, the world may finally read her full confession. Until then, all that remains is the echo of a child's vow that became a queen's doctrine. Never again powerless. Never again silent. 3 times in one night, and never again after.